Hereby call this workshop to order. Today is the August 28th, 2018, 1 p.m. Superintendent's Workshop. This time, Dr. Rendell, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the board members for attending today. We have a lot of information to share. The purpose of the workshop is to share information. So we have 3 topics today that we're going to cover. First, we'll give an update on the 18-19 budget. We have a presentation on possible fueling station project that we will discuss. You know, it's a possibility for us to get involved in the future. And then also to cover my 2018-19 performance goals. But the first presentation is going to be on an update on the 18-19 budget. So we spent several months developing the budget for the 18-19 school year. We held several workshops and worked with the board as we reviewed department budgets, revenues, and expenditures. When we last met and discussed the budget at a workshop like this, the tentative budget that we presented was $291,795,466 and was constructed in such a way that it could result in an unassigned fund balance of $4.7 million or 3.51%. I pledged to the board that afternoon that I would work with staff to bring forward a beginning budget book for approval in September that would result in a projected unassigned fund balance of at least 5%. The beginning budget that we have prepared and will present for approval September 8th currently has an overall budget of $291,080,316 and an unassigned fund balance of $7.2 million or 5.2%. Now, before I share some aspects of that budget and some of the changes that were made between the 2 budgets, I want to thank some people for all of their hard work. I have relied heavily on the finance department as we went through this process. Everyone in that department has helped put this budget together. So I'm just going to read off a few names. These are all the people in the finance department who've been working diligently with us for the past several weeks. So Julie, the director of finance. Stephanie, Kim, Audra, Yari, Deborah H., Kathy, Carrie, Deborah A., Sabrina, Kathy, Janet, that's Kathy R., Janet, Carol, Alma, Mary D., Amy, Joan, Teresa, and of course Lynn Justin. They have done a lot of work to try to help us prepare this budget and deal with my lack of knowledge in some of those areas and my asking a ton of questions. In addition, we have asked someone to come and help us with this process. So to my right at the table with us today is Mr. Conley Weiss. He's a retired director of finance for St. Johns County. And he joined us 2 weeks ago or so and spent several days with the staff refining some of these things that we were doing. So he's going to be sitting with us today to help us if we have any questions about things that we've done or you know, doing with the budget and that kind of thing. So I wanted to thank all of those people publicly for all of their hard work. The biggest concern with the previous budget was some discrepancies in the salary lines of many of our schools. You may recall that at a subsequent meeting, I stated that in some school budget, there was a substantial increase of funds into the salary lines that did not seem to correlate with any large increase in staff. So that's the first area we researched, and we came across 2 issues, and I'll explain them one at a time. First, we wanted to ascertain the true salary cost for each school site so that we could make sure that we had the proper amount budgeted, not too much or too little. So staff in the finance department, many of those people I just mentioned, spent many hours reviewing what's called the commitment report. It's a list of all the people that are housed at a school or a cost center. And we did find schools that had an increased salary allocation in the tentative book that did not match the amount suggested by the commitment report. We worked hard to reduce those salary amounts and appropriately match the salaries with the commitment report. In many of those cases, the amount we settled on was still a slight increase from the previous year. We also found some cases in which the salary amount in the tentative budget appeared appropriate based on the commitment report, but still included a large increase from the previous year's salary allocation. Again, without an increase in staff. So this caused us to question the salary figures representing the previous year's budgets, the columns for the previous years. You may recall it in the budget book. There's a 5-year history of the different costs lines. So what we found was that the figures for the previous year's budgets were live in the spreadsheet that was used to create the budget book pages and were tied to a formula for calculation. We found that there was an error in the formula, and that in many cases, the salary figures for the previous years were grossly underrepresented, lower. So any increase in the salary line for the 18-19 budget appeared even larger than it actually was. So I'm going to take you to two examples to explain. And I've got copies of the the relevant pages in the previous budget book for you all. There's three for the board members, one for you. And Mrs. Poisel, if you could place these over on the table, these are the extras. So this is Rosewood Elementary. And if you could turn in your current budget book to page 26, you'll find Rosewood Elementary. As soon as I can get there. So if you look at the salary line for Rosewood Elementary in the one page, the sheet from last year, from the tentative budget book from July, and you look at the salary lines for the previous years, you'll see that the salary, non-labor discretionary salary, so it's 000, it's the second line of numbers, goes from 2.3 million in 13-14 to 2.3 million in 14-15, 2.3 million in 15-16, 2.3 million in 16-17, 2.3 million in 17-18, and then jumps in the 18-19 estimated budget line to $2.79 million, a $443,000 increase. There was no increase in staff associated with that increase in salary. That appears to be an inordinate jump of $443,000. If you look at the current budget book, you'll see that the salary, let's see if I get there, page, is still about the 2.790446.2, but the previous years paint a much different picture. Rather than being consistently at the 2.3 number each year, the last few years you see a substantial increase, 2.5, 2.6, $2.75 million. You may recall those are the first 3 years of the salary increase for the teachers of $900 each year. So that appears to be a reasonable trend line of increase. And then the 2790442 for this year is only a $30,000 increase from the previous year. So what staff had to do was go back and make sure each of those salary lines were accurate. So again, to explain, in the tentative budget book, the salary lines for many of these schools were off because these figures were live in a spreadsheet. One of the things, if you took a look at a previous budget book, you might have noticed is that in previous budget books, so not the tentative one this year, but if you go back a few years, the substitute budget was not split out from the salary line. We had the substitute salary costs in the non-discretionary salary line. So this was the first year that we split it out. And that's where we believe, when we had to do that we believe that's where the error in the formula occurred. So one of the things that we noticed as we went through each school's salary figure, in many cases the discrepancy was because the previous year's salary amounts were not accurate. So we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that everything was tied to the commitment report, which is the amount of people and salaries associated with that actual building. So we feel pretty confident that the salary amounts for each of the schools is accurate. I do want to take you to another example just that shows you again the discrepancy in the previous year's salary numbers that were really a result of that formula. So if you look at Citrus Elementary, which is on page 40 of your current budget book and the handout which I just gave you, and then I'll try to scroll up there for the people watching on TV. In the previous budget book, in the tentative budget book, the salary amount for 18-19 was $4,190,533.24, and it appeared to be $1 million increase from the previous year's salary. Again, when staff looked at the previous year's salary lines, we found out that the formula had incorrectly calculated those numbers. So in your budget book, we went back and actually corrected the formula and looked at actual expenditures for those years. And you can see that they're tied much more closely to the actual 4.1 million for this year. Again, you know, the large increases, or the increases, really start with the 15-16, 16-17, and 17-18 years, which again were the years of the $900 increase each year. And the increase in salary for this year is only $26,000. The total difference is $26,000, which makes sense because there's relatively no staff change at Citrus Elementary School. So I wanted to show you those two examples of one of the errors we found in the tentative budget book that had caused some concern in the different salary amounts. And so after matching up all the different salary amounts with the commitment report, we then set out to kind of reduce the impact of the general fund everywhere we could, to try to preserve as much of the unrestricted reserves as we could. So the board may recall that earlier in the year we shared that we have the opportunity to spend categorical or restricted funds, and anytime we have the opportunity to spend that, we should, to lessen or mitigate the impact to the general fund. For example, earlier this year we decided to fund several software products with discretionary property tax millage, with the technology portion of the discretionary property tax millage. That's an appropriate use of those funds, and it allowed us to keep more funds in the general fund. You also may recall that we've been cited in audits in the past for having a large carry forward or roll forward in categorical funds. You may recall that we were cited in a previous audit for having the $1.5 million in the workforce development fund. That's a categorical fund that we needed to spend down, and we did. We used the workforce development funds to build the industrial trades building at Treasure Coast Technical College. So we decided to look into the budget and find some areas where we may be able to spend down categoricals to cover some of the costs and relieve the general fund. So we've actually talked about a few of these funds before in some of our other workshops. Both Sebastian River High School and Vero Beach High School have great programs for accelerated courses. So the Sebastian River High School International Baccalaureate program is very successful. It yields funds, actually, and the AP program at Vero Beach High School is very successful and it yields funds. Those funds have been building over time, and so we have large balances in both of those areas. Those funds can be used for different things to support those programs, and so we decided to use some of those funds to pay for salaries. Some of the teachers associated with those programs, we can pay for their salaries or parts of their salaries depending on how much they teach AP or IB with the funds generated from the program. It's something that Connolly knows that other districts do. It's verified in statute. It's something that we can do, so we decided to do that. So we drew down some of the funds from the AP program funds at Vero Beach High School and some of the funds from the International Baccalaureate program at Sebastian River High School to reduce some costs to the general fund for those teaching salaries. We also drew down some state categorical funding sources. We receive a reading allocation from the state, and we use those funds for literacy coaches and reading teachers. We had enough in the carry forward in one of those funds to fund 2 more reading teachers, so we funded 2 of the reading teachers at Gifford Middle School with those reading categorical funds. So again, those salaries come from the reading categorical. We already spend most of that reading categorical on other reading teachers and literacy coach salaries, so that's again something we are allowed to do, and anytime we get a chance to spend categorical, we should. We also decided to access some more funds from the technology portion of the discretionary property tax millage to pay for some other positions in the technology department, in the IT department. These positions support the equipment that is purchased with the funds in the information technology portion of the discretionary property tax millage, so it's an appropriate use of those funds. I have not covered every single measure we took to appropriately fund the programs and reduce the impact of the general fund, but these were the big ones, these were the major ones that we did. I was not planning on going through the budget page by page, we've kind of already done that. This was just kind of a big picture of some of the things we've done to reduce the overall costs, especially the impact to the general fund. This is the beginning budget. This is, the budget is a living, breathing document. The budget changes every day. For example, just yesterday, we received word that there's going to be a slight change to our PICO funding. Our PICO funding will be increased by $10,166. And the allocation of the charter schools will be appropriate as well. So we actually will be making a change to those funds before we print the final beginning budget book that we're going to ask you to approve on September 8th.
So for those of us who aren't budget nerds, what's PICO?
Conley, do you remember the
I don't.
acronym?
It's,
Public
I do not-
education,
public
capital outlay.
education, yeah,
Capital outlay, but
yeah.
And
But
it's-
it has, there's restrictions on how you can
Right,
use.
capital.
Yeah, it's capital.
right, it's not like we can throw that money into the
Buses,
general fund.
buildings, and business machines.
Right, so, and also, yes,
Mrs. Orton?
No, I have a question. I was waiting for you to answer it, but in case you were going to get there, I want to go ahead and ask. Mr. Weiss?
Weiss.
Weiss. So you were brought in and you looked at just the salaries and that discrepancy, correct?
Yes.
So that's, to me, one line item of project numbers. What about the 38 others? Because I'm really concerned if we're going back to 2014 and we're seeing all this, whenever we really dive deep into just one item, when are we going to dive deep into the other 38 items here? When is that going to occur? Because if we've messed up this much on this one, that's a big red flag there that we have
Yes,
to
ma'am.
look into this. So when are we going to be looking into these?
right, so the next thing I was going to say is, we're not done.
Okay.
We will be contracting with a firm to conduct a complete audit of all the different salary line, all of the different funding lines in the budget, top to bottom, a full audit, really in the budgeting process, but taking into account every different expenditure line to make sure that we're as accurate as possible in all, not just budget preparation, but in expenditures and accounting for stuff in the right place. So that's the next step, is to go top to bottom in all the other accounting strings, all those different lines, the 38 other ones.
So I guess my next question would be, who should have had the knowledge to be able to catch this before now? Because, we are going back to 2014, 15. So is that the finance director, or is it the assistant superintendent of finance? How did it get here?
Well, I'm actually going to
And I
ask,
understand what you're saying, but
Right.
it's a lot here.
right, so I'm actually going to ask Conley to explain how, when he came and we sat down and started doing some of this, he talked about how he kind of had the department organized, or how he had different people working in one area and another people working on the other. So the budget side and the,
Want me to tell my story of how we,
Well-
or, yeah.
you said if we were going to do this moving forward, what you suggest.
Yeah, well, it is, again, I was a CFO for 25 years, and this didn't happen. To get where St. John's is today, didn't happen overnight. I just didn't wake up one day and say, let's do this. It progressed over a period of time, but is the way we started was in December, and I think you do something similar with principals and the FTE staff projecting their FTE and how many students are they going to have in the different categories, and watch that, and that will grow. And over the course of the spring, that will mature and change all the time, is then we used a set of formulas, okay, that said, based on this, you would get this many students. And it took into account that they don't arrive in the equal numbers, and so it took advantage of that. That information was, the principals made that with the FTE staff. That information went back to the budget department. It was funded, and the principal got a budget, okay, that was based on a lot of formulas. And they had that for several weeks, okay, and then they came into a room with the budget staff, the HR staff, the ESE staff, Title I as appropriate, and they went over their budget in detail, okay? A small elementary school might take 30 to 45 minutes. A large high school might take 2 hours to have that conversation. But all the history is there, okay? And that's reviewed. And so it got a pretty comprehensive, that school's budget got a pretty comprehensive look. And the other piece I would tell you is that process was done with everybody, schools and departments, by the end of May. And so the budget office and myself then had the month of May to literally look for trouble, okay, and look for problems, which we did, okay? And sometimes, during that process, there was always a, oh my goodness, and it wasn't wrong. It was there was some bad data. There were other issues that you had to straighten out and fix it before you got to the budget hearing. We were done well in advance of that. And so I would really encourage the staff here to be done by the end of May so that you can look for these kinds of issues a few days before you print the book, okay?
We also talked a little bit about the separation of powers, like having a budget officer and.
Yeah, I mean, there's a budget office, and FTE office, and an HR, okay? And they meet on a pretty regular basis to get the data right before it gets to the schools. And then during this, and once I believe they start around July 1, that the representatives of that group meet every day at 4 o'clock to make sure that that you're responding to changes in FTE. Sometimes schools go up and schools go down, and you don't respond to every change, but you see the pattern. So by the time school starts, you've made a concerted effort to have the right resources to the right place at the right time. And it's right. It changes all of the time. I mean, even the number of students and staff changes 2-3 weeks into school on a pretty regular basis, but the players are there. Now, the budget lines and looking back historically and do that, I mean, somebody in the budget office has just really got to pay attention to that and compare document to document over the years and not let that happen. And I would tell you, when I was a CFO, I probably by this time personally had a minimum of 300 hours doing nothing but looking and checking and asking questions.
Mrs. Zirk, follow-up?
Thank you, I appreciate that. So, by the way, I look up to St. Johns County. They definitely are a model for the state. But what I'm hearing is that when the schools put together their team and their budget, it's sent over to, in St. John's, it's sent over to a budget office. And at the budget office, that's where they really drill down and they would find this.
Yes.
So your budget office, since you've been here a couple of weeks, how would you, comparing apples to apples, who here is over our budget office? Who would be the one that would have to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Well, I mean, I think you had a budget director in that, or a person, I'm not sure what the titles are, but that person has retired, and Julie is here, and that means she has 5 months of experience, okay?
Right.
And is, my suggestion would be that there be a budget office, and there be at least be a director, and there be someone else that's going to be approving budget amendments and all the details associated with this, and would be providing information on a regular basis to the person who heads up that office, but it would be their primary responsibility to build and monitor and report on the budget on a monthly basis. And they knew it, they know it in detail, is when, if the CFO sits down and says, this number went from here to there, they ought to be able to have a work paper or a document that says, this is how it happened. And I think Julie's starting to accumulate. I just left her office and she said, somebody's going to ask me in a month how this got from here to there, so I'm going to keep that. But most of all, that was a process, okay, that got a lot of attention from myself and the director. The director of the budget at St. Johns County has been there for 25 years. And so he has seen lots and done, and the process is very automated. And the meetings where everybody comes together and talks about those things, I brought a copy of the agenda of those meetings, and that has refined over a number of years. Again, gets everything, at least you have a fighting chance to get everything in the right place.
Mrs. Justice.
What I'm hearing you say is possibly that there should be a pretty good system of checks and balances
Yes.
going on. And I
Yeah.
feel like perhaps, and mind you, I know we're in the middle of some digging as to exactly where we are, so I'm going to be sensitive to that, but that perhaps there were some checks there were some balances with not a lot of checks,
Yeah.
and a lot of people at the table.
Yes.
And that's concerning to me as a board member. I have looked through this budget quite a bit, and I've met with Dr. Rendell several times, and I do have concerns about expenditures where I don't see projected FTE that warrant some of the expenditures or different things. So, and that's something I've brought to Dr. Rendell's attention in a couple of different areas. So I am hopeful that as we continue through this process, that we create a system of checks and balances with a lot of people at the table working together to make sure that we have a budget that works well for our students. And that's really all I'm going to say on that right now. I think that's what's appropriate.
So I have a question. As part of your consulting engagement, at the end of your engagement, will you be providing a written report with recommendations for structural changes as well as operational changes?
I could certainly do that. I think there's a draft. There's some my ideas from 3 days have been expressed, but I could write more and provide more detail into that process. But I think actually I hadn't ever thought of it that way. Is I viewed it as I just didn't want to make a mistake and get somebody far overdone and someone underdone. And so in having FTE and the people who projected and who knew FTE frontwards and backwards and knew what was happening in the counties, the curriculum staff who knew what they wanted, the resources they wanted at the schools, and HR, and everybody was there. And I guess I really hadn't thought of it as a given, as a check, but actually that's what happened. Now that I look back on it, is people would say, no, that's not going to happen, or no, you don't, that person is going to retire. There was just a lot of give and take in those meetings.
Yeah, well, I would just be, I'd be very interested in the written portion,
Okay.
simply because, people change, personalities
Yeah.
come and go and things like that, and,
Yes.
knowledge that's codified in writing is preserved forever.
Okay.
Or for as long as it
Yes.
lasts, but, or if you could simply point us in the direction of a best practice model or
Okay.
things like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be something you custom create,
Great, yeah.
but just, this is exactly how a proper budget office should look and
Okay.
run. And these are the inputs, these are the processes,
Okay.
and these are the outputs.
Okay.
And then these are the metrics we track.
Yeah.
Mrs. Justice.
I was talking to someone the other day, and they were talking about a mindset in an organization and how change is sometimes difficult, and how sometimes the way we do things are just the way we do them because we've always done them that way. And they expressed a phrase, they said, until now. And I think this is very much an until now conversation about really making sure that our priorities in this district are what are driving the decisions we make in the budget, and that we're all working together to make sure that that happens.
And the only other piece I would say, and it's for me, it's deja vu all over again, is when the first 5 years that I worked in St. Johns County, it was with terms. And the conversation that you're having now, I had at different levels for 5 years with terms, okay? And so we changed to a relational database where if you changed it here, the data changed here, 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 and here. And I don't think terms, I mean, you can make a change in HR and budget doesn't.
Object-oriented, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. And so if you make full use of its relational ability to talk and tie those things together, and it takes time to learn that, to what it can do, then I think that will be a step forward. Should stop. When there's not a slot there, somebody doesn't get hired. Somebody stops and asks.
I just want to say thank you to Mr. Weiss for coming and
It was my
helping us
pleasure.
and working with our staff. And thank you to the Finance Department, because I recognize that this has been a challenging few weeks. And I know that everyone's worked very hard, and they've tried their best to answer as many questions that have been asked of them, and there have certainly been a lot of questions.
Mrs. Orr?
Well, to follow up, and I appreciate those comments, but you speaking of terms, when are we going to be changing over our accounting into the Century
Right,
technology?
So Focus is the ERP that we're going to use to shift all of our different systems into, and we've shifted a lot of the student database, well, all of the student database components into Focus. HR was next, I believe, and then finance was after that. So it's in the queue. The sooner the better, because hopefully it would have the capabilities that Mr. Weiss is talking about. I do want to say thank you to Conley for coming. He was of no cost to the district. The Florida Association of District School Superintendents covered his costs.
That's
as
part of your membership.
part of our membership, in that we're due a certain number of days of consulting services. So our membership in that organization has paid off for this for sure. He's probably not done. I'm probably going to be leaning on him some more in the near future. And then there's some other retired CFOs that are also out there that we may be calling upon them as well. I did want to let the board know and the audience know that there is some good news in the budget horizon. We were on the phone today with the Department of Emergency Management, the State Department of Emergency Management, and we've talked in the past about some funds that were still owed from FEMA from the 2004 hurricanes. And I don't want to make any promises, but the phone call today was very productive. The department in Tallahassee has access to those funds. We just have to turn in whatever paperwork we need to turn in and those kinds of things. And right now we're talking about $1.5 million. So I don't know when it's going to come, and but it was a very productive conversation today, and that would just go into the general fund. We also know that the governor has asked the legislature to take the remaining funds from the Guardian program and put those back into a safe schools allocation. So if we do receive funds from that route, that would help us in the general fund, because we are dipping into the general fund to cover the costs of the school resource officers. Not a lot. I mean, our safe schools allocation is close. And again, we're very thankful for the 50-50 cost share with our local law enforcement. But if those Guardian program funds were put back into safe schools and then distributed to the districts, we would have funds there. And also, you may recall, also as part of 7026, there's a pot of money for hardening of your school buildings. And so the application forms for that just came out. Mr. Teskey and the team have identified some different projects that we would go after with that money, so we'll be submitting for that as well. So, there are, again, that's categorical, so it doesn't really help the general fund, but it would help us, do some things to help secure our schools. With that, I didn't really have anything else that I wanted to cover in the budget presentation. We don't usually have a workshop in this point between the tentative and the final budget, but I thought it was at least important to share some of the things we've encountered as we were preparing this final beginning budget.
So the final prognosis is the ending fund balance of,
So the budget that we are going to put out, advertised Thursday for approval next Thursday, right now has a 5.20% fund balance. That may shift a little bit over the next day or so because we're going to review all the salary lines one more time. We're going to make that PICO adjustment. And if we see anything else that up or down, we're going to make those adjustments. So, but the goal again is to make sure that we don't have a ending unrestricted fund balance of less than 5%.
and how many programs did we have to slash to get there?
We did not have to cut any programs at this point.
Great. Thank you. Bring it in for landing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ruiz.
Thank you, sir.
Pleasure. And for more
Thanks again to the
service.
Finance Department for
Yes.
all their hard work. I mean, Julie's, to be honest, Julie has, every time I come by this building, her car is here, even after hours. So that's dedication above and beyond, so we definitely appreciate that.
And I should say, in the time that I was here, in the few days, that everybody was very helpful, and there was no pushback. Everybody gathered the information and was happy to do it.
Thank you. Okay, is that it for budget, Mr.
That's it,
Superintendent?
that's it for budget, yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you. Do we need a reset?
Actually, the second topic on our agenda was the possibility of a fueling station at the transportation compound. The people associated with that program were not due to arrive till 2.
Oh, there.
They're
Okay.
coming in now, but we
Do you
can,
want to flip the
we could
agenda?
flip the agenda and go straight to the superintendent's goals because that is probably not a long conversation. So,
Okay.
and I have.
As long as they don't
them
have to
up.
be somewhere and we're holding them up.
So,
Thank you.
Mr. Weiss, you
Okay.
and Julie can exit for now.
Okay. We'll work for a few minutes.
All right, so if we could switch. And Peggy will pass these out. What I wanted to do is just update the board on any changes that I've made to my goals for the 18-19 school year. The superintendent's goals are tied directly to the strategic plan's goals and outcomes, measurable outcomes. And I did not make too many changes. We're only in year one of, now we're into year 2 of the strategic plan, so I didn't think it would be appropriate to make too many changes. But as we went through this year and as we measured our progress, I did see some areas that I thought we could change or adjust. The first one in the goal area of student success, I changed my goals percentages to mirror the goal percentages in the strategic plan. So, and I've numbered these, which in the past we used bullets. So in number 2 and number 3, the previous was 5 percentage points, and I went down to 2, not trying to reduce my goals, but to make it mirror the strategic plan goals, which were all at 2%. So all of these have been switched to 2%, except the last 2. I still think those are extremely important, so I left those at 5%, increase the number of minority students in accelerated courses and demonstrating success. So those were the only changes there, 2% in all areas except the last 2. If we move on to the goal of culture and climate, the only areas that changed were number 6 and number 7. In the previous measures of success, we were using the student and staff climate surveys, just to grade and that kind of thing. And that's an autopsy, so to speak, at the end of the year. And it's not really measurable. We are using a software program this year that has a survey component that measures social and emotional well-being and culture and climate. And we're going to have our students and our staff take that survey twice a year. And so we'll have measurable results in this climate survey, social and emotional learning and well-being survey. So we're going to be doing that twice a year. And so I've switched to use that as my measure for number 5 and number 6. So we actually will do a presentation on that survey and that software probably in September, because we're going to ask the first round of the surveys to take place in October. So that's a new social and emotional measurement that we want. You know, in culture and climate, that's kind of the goal, is to provide a safe and caring learning environment where students feel supported and valued and that kind of thing. So we need to measure before the end of the year and just say, what grade do you give your school? You know, so there's it's a very well regarded survey component that we'll be using.
Just a quick
And then,
question.
yes, ma'am.
What is the name of
Panorama.
Panorama?
Panorama is the name of the software program.
And do we insert our own questions, or is it already built?
They
out?
have a range of questions that we choose from, and then we can add 2 or 3 of our own, depending on. And we're going to, like I said, we're going to give you a presentation on it. And then we changed number 16 and 17. Originally, it said establish a baseline, so now we're going to ensure that each school, you may recall when we presented the information to you, it was 12 student recognition ceremonies a year and 12 staff recognition ceremonies a year. So we want to make sure that we hold everybody accountable to that. That was the average, so that meant some schools were holding more than 12 ceremonies, but some schools were holding less, and so we want to have at least 12. So that's the only change there.
I know meets also means meets or exceeds, but would it make sense to clarify that or set it as an aspirational goal?
Meets or exceeds, yeah, we can do that.
Wordsmithing, but
No, that's,
putting a positive frame around it. You know?
well, that's the thing, we did have several schools that had more than 12, and I don't want them to think they should drop back to 12.
Good point.
So, yeah. When we get to high-quality workforce, I changed number 10 and number 11. Number 10 was to establish an onboarding protocol, and now it's to make sure that we implement the onboarding protocol with every employee. And then number 11, we established that question last year. We inserted that question last year, so now I want it, so we only had 1 year of results, so we established our baseline.
Mm-hmm.
So now I want to increase that by 2 percentage points, you know, always and often, you know, positive responses to that. And that's the only 2 changes in culture and climate. I mean, in a high-quality workforce.
Okay.
In school community relations, we changed number 4 and number 7. Number 4, it states host a minimum of 2 town hall meetings to improve communication and engage parents and other stakeholders. We actually are not going to use the term town hall. Typically, when you have a town hall, there's some information you want to share, but not necessarily, you're not actually asking for input or feedback or participation. It's more like information you're giving out. And we're going to have 2 parent engagement or community engagement events. We haven't come up with an actual term for them yet, a name for them yet, but if anybody wants to know, we're already planning October 16th and 18th will be the first 2 of these. We'll have one in the north and one in the south, and then we'll do another one in the spring. The target actually of these community engagements, these events, is going to be parents and other community stakeholders. Far too often we do things and we know what we're doing, but our stakeholders don't. So for example, at a community engagement like this, we could have a session where we explain what iReady is and how it can be used as an informational tool for teachers and that kind of thing to inform instruction. We could do a presentation on Focus, how to sign into Focus to check your son or daughter's grades, how to sign up for text alerts and things like that. We actually hope to have our new website up and running in October, so we could show everybody the new website and see different ways they could access information through the website and the app and that kind of thing. So, you know, have these engagement sessions where parents and other stakeholders can learn about different things we're doing, and we can share information, we can get information from them and that kind of thing. So October 16th and 18th, we're already targeting to be, you know, the ones in the fall, and then we'll do another set in the spring. And then the other one that we wanted to change, their number 7, is launch an interactive website and mobile communications application or app. So I've already seen the template or the prototype for our new web page, and it's much improved. And when we launch that, we will also launch the interactive app. So that's something that will be different. And then the last goal area of strategic partnerships, a couple changes. Number 2 is to ensure that 100% of our schools earn the Florida Department of Education 5-Star School Award. This is an award that 2 of our schools received last year, and really almost every single one of our schools qualifies for this if they do some things that we already do, if they document some things that we already do. And the 5-Star School Award kind of measures community engagement, how much do we engage the community in what we do. It has student performance measures you have to meet and that kind of thing, but I actually believe 100% of our schools will be eligible for the 5-Star School Award this year. We did apply last year. I believe every one of our schools applied last year, and we should find out within the month whether our schools attained that or not. And then number 3, increase the number of parent engagement activities such as parent academies and maintain records of participation. Last year, the goal was establish a number, and so now it's to increase. Number 5, we did change the word to maintain an inventory of all partnerships with community organizations. It had established last time. And number 8, increase the number of hours donated by volunteers at all our schools and buildings by 2 percentage points. It was 47,000, over 47,000 hours last year. So we've got to increase that. And then number 9, ensure 100% of our schools earn the Florida Department of Education Golden School Award. We actually applied for that last year as well. And this is based almost entirely on volunteer hours that are given or received at each school. And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but we get 100% or we get, on the Golden School Award, I think we, yeah, but the DOE hasn't officially released that information yet, but we're pretty sure that we received 100%. And so if we didn't this past year, then the goal is to get 100% this coming year. And then last one, number 10, remains to generate additional organized volunteer programs that will help benefit students and staff in our schools and buildings. So overall, not too many changes to the superintendent's goals for this year, all tied to the strategic plan. So these will be coming before you for approval at the next business meeting.
Any feedback, members? No, not tonight.
No, not yet.
Any other feedback?
Yes. Matt, thank you.
Recognize, sure.
Um,
That's fine.
Throughout the year, we were given updates on the monitoring framework for the strategic plan, and information was inserted into that framework. And I think when I did a review, and when you look back over the year, school grade is something that the public will sometimes look at and make judgments on schools or on student growth based on that. And I think that there is a lot of misunderstanding as to how that school grade is calculated. And I think that the strategic plan monitoring framework really gave us a much better picture of the learning gains and that our students were making, and the gains that the district was making overall. So I encourage anyone who would like to, learn more about some of the different things that are happening in the district and the way that everything is aligning with the work in the strategic plan, that's a great way to be able to analyze that.
Anything else? I'll say this, if no one else has a comment. I'm really pleased to see the superintendent's goals tied to the strategic plan in a very specific way, specific, SMART goals, if you will, with 2 percentage points here, 5 percentage points there. It's not fuzzy. You either hit it or you don't. You increase by 1% or you don't. That's exactly what was envisioned when we began this process, to my mind, as far as the implementation of the strategic plan and holding the superintendent and district leadership accountable for getting those results. So I'm pleased to see it even further evolve into that now that we have benchmarks and we can do that. And I know that wasn't necessarily possible in the first iteration because we didn't have a baseline. So
Correct.
now that we have baselines and we can measure those incremental improvements, that's an exciting thing. So, any other comments, questions, concerns? No? Okay.
So,
Ready to move to
Mr.
the
Chair,
next
if we
one?
could take a 5-minute recess to get
Certainly.
set up for the next presentation, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, we are recessed until 1:55. Hereby reconvene this workshop. Dr. Rendell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last item that we're going to cover today is about the possibility of a fueling station for liquid propane at our transportation compound. The board may recall that we've talked about the number of buses that we have that are fueled by liquid propane. I believe 61% or so of our buses that we run now run on liquid propane, and we do not have a fueling station at the transportation compound to fuel those buses. So they have to have a fuel truck brought in, or they have to be fueled at another location. So what we're going to do today is just hear a presentation about a possible way to address that by installing a fueling station there at the transportation compound. So this is information that the Transportation Department and facilities have kind of been putting together for months. I've been waiting for the opportunity to at least share this information with you. Today, like as all workshops, we're just asking, we're just sharing the information. We're not asking for any approval or anything today, but we just want to get your feedback on this idea and everything. So Mr. Teskey has a whole team with him, so I'm going to turn it over to him, and he's going to begin the presentation.
Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Rendell. Dr. Rendell, thank you for the opening statement. You've covered pretty much what I was going to cover. Ms. Idalette will introduce our panel here, and we'll be underway. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start with my right, introducing our national account representative for AmeriGas, who is our propane provider, Mr. David Rigney. To the right of Mr. Rigney is Mr. Richard Trammell, who is our garage coordinator. And then to his right is Mr. Gary Crumbacker, our warehouse foreman. Just want to start with a little history to tell you how we evolved into propane-powered buses. In 2007, the Environmental Protection Agency issued an exhaust emission reduction. So in 2009, our Indian River County School District, along with school board approval, began a 3-bus pilot program of propane buses. We were the first in our district to purchase propane-powered school buses. Buses were immediately noted to be quieter, have less emissions, and fuel and maintenance costs were noticeably reduced as well. So after completing the year-long pilot, we were able to move 2 propane tanks to our facility. They were installed, and we became eligible for the federal rebate program because we were able to dispense our own propane at that point. Beyond that year pilot in 2011, we began to acquisition the 10 propane buses annually. As our number of propane buses increased, we soon outgrew the ability to fuel our own buses, with the company unable to keep up with our demand. When we turned to bobtailing, which was required because they could not keep up with our demand, bobtailing requires a fuel truck to come into our location, connect, and fuel each bus. Use of bobtailing then caused us to lose the eligibility for the federal rebates. We are currently using that same process for fueling, and even with our fleet being at 61%. Our school district was honored in 2016-17 by the Central Florida Clean Air Coalition as propane pioneers, since we were the first to purchase the propane-powered buses, and we were also the first school district to achieve a fleet of over 50%. As being propane pioneers, our leadership has also contributed to other Florida districts now employing over 600 propane buses. Indian River County alone has achieved 2.5 million miles of safe, reliable, cost-effective, and improved air quality for community members residing in Indian River County with the use of propane-powered buses. We're in need, and we are requesting your support in moving forward with construction of a propane fueling station so we can maintain the work that's before us. And that's our 85 daily bus routes, numerous field trips, school shuttles, middays, fit-ins, school and community after-school transports, and summer programs. So we are requesting your support in being able to move forward with this plan. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. David Rigney at this point to share his PowerPoint presentation.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So I work for AmeriGas Propane. Like Jennifer introduced me, I am the National Auto Gas Account Manager, so I cover the Southeast and the Northeast, so about 50% of the country. So quickly, I'd like to go over basically where propane comes from, our AmeriGas overview, how propane auto gas can benefit Indian River County School District, the federal tax rebate, and then the fueling and infrastructure. This is a little bit about AmeriGas. Those dots represent all the locations that we cover throughout the United States. And for those who may be new to propane, If you had asked me 20 years ago where propane comes from, it would have been a mix of crude oil and natural gas. In the last 5 years, that has resulted in refinery processes, and about 95% of propane now comes from natural gas. We have this as being a domestic fuel. With AmeriGas, we have over 510 rail cars. We have our own transportation company. What this means to the school district is, as the refinery process, as you see here, is going to be stored, and those are in 3 primary locations: Mount Bellevue, Texas, Conway, Kansas, and Hattiesburg, Mississippi. So all those propane storage areas, it could be in under the ground, in mines, or in tanks. Then AmeriGas will receive this either by rail, by semi, or by pipeline, and then that comes to our districts, which would be right here in Vero Beach. We have a district here in Vero. Then, depending on the size of the load, we use what Jennifer referred to here as a bobtail, so we can actually literally come and fuel the buses on site. Or what our goal is to move to a larger tank and do what we call a transport load. So it's an 18-wheel semi-truck. And the big difference for Indian River County School District is that AmeriGas owns our own transportation company. Now, why is that important? Well, as you are well aware, we have storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, etc. So in a need of emergency crises, I can have our semis divert to Indian River County Schools, so we can ensure that you are going to have a fuel load. That even after the storm has been here. For example, I have a transportation company that's in Fort Lauderdale, MVT. They were out of gasoline, they were out of diesel during the process of our last hurricane for 3 days. AmeriGas was on site delivering fuel every day. They did not miss one delivery. Now, that is important to them because they're helping elderly from assisted livings or nursing homes, same way that it would be for you guys if you were implemented to do some type of emergency response. We'll make sure you have that fueling. So it's very important to keep in mind. This is a little bit about AmeriGas. I know it's an eye chart, so if you need this, or you may even have that in front of you, but that is our financial statements for the last 4 years. So you can see that AmeriGas is a very profitable company. When you look at the school districts, Jennifer alluded to it earlier, 830 districts have school buses now that are running on propane. As of 2017, 90 new school districts began to use propane in their fleets. So this is something that I have done for 7 years. It continues to grow. It is very, very important to our schools for not just the climate aspect and the green aspect, but also because of the cost savings that the school will be able to have. Here are some reasons that school districts are considering propane. The ease of maintenance, which Richard can speak to, the reduction in price for the fuel, environmental concerns. The challenges that we have as far as propane is the driver behavior. These school bus drivers have to drive the propane bus a little differently than they do a diesel. I don't know how much experience you had with diesel buses, but if you're at a traffic light, the light turns green, you have to push that accelerator all the way to the floor, and it slowly builds torque and horsepower, and then you proceed. With propane, it's not like that. It's like a regular vehicle or a car. You push the accelerator, the bus picks up. So it's a little bit of training for the drivers. And then we'll talk about the infrastructure piece. That is a huge part of this presentation. 76% of the propane fuel was cited was the most frequently adopted, and 55% of the fuel also provides the simplest maintenance. Again, the maintenance departments here, they can talk and address that because of the diesel with DEF filters and all the things they have to do with the diesel engines. This is just one example. It may not be applicable to Indian River County School Districts per se, but when you look at the lifetime savings of a vehicle and the maintenance that's done, other maintenance costs, the total cost when you're comparing to that, about if the bus were to use 200,000 miles in its lifetime, these are the cost savings. When you look at the total maintenance of the propane was about $3,700, and then with gasoline, $5,000. But when you look at diesel, there's a substantial savings there for the school district when you're looking at the total savings just by using propane. So narrowing it down to your focus, Indian River County School Districts, In 2015, you used about 108,000 gallons. In 2018, you're up to 260,000 gallons of propane a year. That has increased exponentially over the last 3 or 4 years. So yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Joseph.
What was our percentage of buses that were using propane in 2015?
2015, we had
We get at least 10 a year,
Right, we swap out 10 here.
so that would be 30.
33.
33.
33.
Thank you.
Okay. So I did a quick analysis based on the actual cost. To clarify, in red is MTB, that's Mount Bellevue, going back to where I talked before about the 3 primary locations for the propane storage, and then your actual cost. So in 2015, propane was 75 cents. That was the cost of the gas. And then we have our adder, in other words, to get the gas from that pipeline to our district, to the school district, you were paying $1.25. And you'll see these numbers do fluctuate because the price of propane, it's not a fixed price, it's a commodity, so it does adjust depending on the demand. So that price of propane will fluctuate. What we do at AmeriGas is we fix your markup. So that would be what we'll talk about so we can clarify that. So just to be clear, the price of propane changes, but the markup will not. So in this case, you were paying $1.25 and 15, 98 cents and 16, $1.16 and 17, and $1.45 in 2018. 95 cents, there's a reason for that. And if you do research on propane, going back again to those 3 major terminals, Mount Bellevue is in Texas, which is right on the Gulf. We are now exporting billions of gallons of propane to other countries. It is a huge sell for the United States at this time. It is a domestic fuel. So that is why that price has increased over the last couple years. Again, it will fluctuate depending on the demand.
So what you're proposing is a cost-plus pricing structure?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. So when you look at then the actual cost to Indian River County School District, by using simple math, you used 106 or 108,000 gallons. This is what you Indian River County School Districts would have paid in 2015 as we look at the usage increase. Of course, the spend does increase somewhat. And there's a reason for this. This again is, if I had a crystal ball, I could sit here and tell you what the prices of propane would be. I wouldn't need to work for AmeriGas. I'd be making a lot more money by being able to project that. It's something that has a lot to do with weather, climate, exports, and so forth. But this is just an assumption based on our major terminal here. Is in September, we're at that 90 cents at Mount Bellevue. But as you can see, as we go through, this is going to decrease and level out. So we look for propane to be somewhere between 75 and 80 cents, depending on the time of year and depending on the demand. So you kind of get an idea of where that price would be. But again, circumstances could change that. So there is a federal tax rebate. This is a retroactive rebate that is given by the government. It's a federal tax rebate. It's gone between 50 cents and 34 cents. Just this last year, 2017, the government approved it again, and it would be 50 cents per gallon as a customer dispenses the propane. So when our bobtail, the truck, pulls into your schoolyard, hooks up to your school bus, and provides the fueling, because you're not doing the fueling, AmeriGas is, you're not entitled to the 50 cents, AmeriGas is. So this is one reason to consider putting some type of equipment on your property so that Indian River County gets that rebate. I can't say 100% for certain it will be approved for 2018, but I can tell you the last 8 years, it has been and always continues to they seem to pass that about 7 months in the next year. So July timeframe of next year, we'll get approval for hopefully 2018. So what does that look like to Indian River County School Districts. If you were pumping your own fuel in 2015, with the tax rebate, you used 153,000 gallons, you would have received a check from the government for $76,000. In 2016, you would have received a check for 73, almost $74,000. 17, 85, and then I only did up to the last 3 months, but with 80,000 gallons at the time I did this, you would be receiving $28,000. Again, can't promise, can't guarantee it, but those monies are out there if approved by Washington. Yes?
So do you currently receive that $85,000?
That's a great question. It really comes down to, what's the best way of putting this? Logistics. So, to my knowledge, I'm not aware that AmeriGas did go after that particular money on that particular account. I can clarify and get you the answer to that, but I don't want to speak out of.
Because I would imagine since we're such valued customers and have pioneered propane busing across the state.
Absolutely.
That you would maybe pass that savings on to us, right? If you were receiving that rebate.
I can ask, but that's above my level. It's a good question. Very good question.
Thanks.
What we do offer, and this particular $5,000 grant, that is not applicable in this case to Indian River County School District. We developed this program about a year ago. It's for our new customers that we just brought on. However,
So punish us for
No,
our
that's it.
consistent
Like a
Good point.
TV.
Right.
I like the way you
Comcast.
think. What I went back to our company with was, I have valued customers like Indian River County School District. And it would behoove all of us to make sure that we reward those who are using propane. So the company is willing to do $2,500 for existing customers. So it's not the $5,000, it's $2,500. We asked that we have a minimum 3-year contract with the customer. We own the equipment, meaning AmeriGas owns the equipment. Minimum of 3 vehicles is not applicable. We will make a one-time annual payment, and what AmeriGas is willing to do is $2,500 for the first 20 buses, the next 20 buses you order, and the following year if you order another 20 buses. So you can do the math, 20 times $2,500. That would be a one-time check for 2018, 19, and 2019 and 20. So this is kind of what it would look like for Indian River County. I do have a 30,000-gallon tank that has been on the ground for 2 years waiting for Indian River County School Districts to make a decision. I've saved it for you, knowing that we're going to pass this. And then the dispensers are going to be just like a gasoline dispenser. It pumps 8 to 10 gallons a minute. The bus drivers or whoever will do the fueling will not notice the difference between gasoline, diesel, or propane as far as the time to fill the vehicle. This is a 30,000-gallon tank with 8 dispensers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is in Fulton County, Georgia. I just completed this with Canopy. And they ordered 150 buses, and they're getting ready to duplicate that, so I'm going to duplicate this install for the Fulton County School District in Atlanta, Georgia. So that kind of gives you that idea. This would be kind of what we would do for Indian River County installation. It's a schematic showing that what we're planning on doing, and you have that copy of that in front of you. If you'll take a look at that real quick, there's what I would call an access road that the buses would be able to pull down, and they would pull up to 2 dispensers, which are going to have 2 hoses each. So 4 buses would be able to fuel at the same time. The tank would be off to the side, and we would pipe and run this over to the dispensers. So to break that down as far as your cost analysis, the propane, if you were to purchase this, that is an option for Indian River County School District, is to purchase this. You would get the 30,000-gallon tank, 2 5 horsepower pumps, the dual host 18-foot hoses, and this Stobley quick disconnect. Now, what that real quick means to the school district is the old way to fuel buses with what we call an Acme. So it looks like a gasoline nozzle, but you literally screw the end to the bus. With this Stobley nozzle, it is a quick disconnect. Think of it as kind of an air hose. The bus driver would pull up, it pops on, they fuel the bus. When it's full, it automatically shuts off and it disengages. What that means to your personnel that are fueling the buses is there's no vapor. Because on the old system, you'd have a little bit of vapor, so they will not have that with these quick disconnects. Much safer and more efficient. Also included with the 269,000 is the drawings, permitting. It's a turnkey operation. I will say on a side note that we are not including the canopy in this 269,555 pricing if Indian River County School District elects to have AmeriGas put this equipment in and would want the canopy. I can sub that out and have that completed. That's going to be around $40,789. Full attention is required at this statement. Nothing is free. So what AmeriGas does is it goes out and it purchases the equipment. We also hire subcontractors to do the work. I have 4 companies that I get pricing from. I've already done this, and they come in. It's a turnkey operation for Indian River County School Districts. You do not have to do anything. We put in the crash post, we can put in the electric, we put in all the dispensers, everything. What we do not require is any money out of pocket. So everything that I've talked to you about as far as the infrastructure, with the exception of the canopy, it would cost Indian River County School District $0. We take that upon us. Now, how do we get that money back? Remember, we talked about the price of propane and then that adder? That's how you pay for that. We put it into what we call through the hose. So in order for Indian River County School District to have a 30,000-gallon tank with 4 dispensers or 4 hoses, everything done, $0 out of pocket.
Would you like to recognize Ms. Justice? Okay.
So there must be a significant cost savings for AmeriGas to have this type of situation rather than running trucks at bobtailing, as you call it.
Excellent point. Absolutely.
So is the cost per gallon for us less?
Because of the amount of capital that you can see here, and because we take that on and we basically become the banker or finance that, it's going to be similar, but the difference is that you get that 50 cent that the federal government's going to get now, and we maintain that equipment for the duration of the contract. So if a pump goes down, that's AmeriGas. If the dispenser breaks, that's AmeriGas. Now, if there's negligence on the bus drivers, and by the way, this has happened, they forget, they get on the bus, they drive away with the hose, that, of course, would be the school districts. But as long as it's normal wear and tear, tank, maintenance, all those things, that's all on us. So it's similar, and depending on the buses, and what we do is the volume based on capital output. So if you had 5 buses using a small amount of fuel with a lot of equipment, that price obviously has a difference. But in this case, you're around 61%, so it's going to be very similar.
Mrs. Ork.
The propane tank and equipment, what is the life of that equipment?
It's a great question. The tank itself will last 100 years plus. They're made out of steel. The maintenance, because the fuel is clean and it's a very clean fuel, very little maintenance required on that. Now, of course, dispenser, the actual dispenser looking thing, and the pump, those have a 1-year warranty, but again, because we own that equipment, so if we have a 5-year contract with Indian River County School District, there's no need to worry about that. It's on us. We take care of that, so there would not be maintenance charged to that.
Follow-up.
And excuse me
Sure.
for this question.
Sure.
AmeriGas, who else provides propane? Who are the other companies? So what I'm hearing is if we purchase this equipment with AmeriGas, then we're stuck with AmeriGas. even if there is another company that comes about that might offer more economical propane, but we're stuck with, we purchased this equipment that's gonna last 100 years, but we're tied to only being able to use AmeriGas? Is that what I'm understanding?
Technically, we're not purchasing it because they're putting it through the pump. We're paying it off, we're amortizing the equipment cost through our their profit margin, which is cost plus. So it's a pretty good business model if you're AmeriGas. The district provides space and electricity and infrastructure for the pumping operation. AmeriGas is a for-profit corporation, which, according to our guest, that they're, quote, very profitable. And I see that in their financials, which is not a bad thing. I love the free market and capitalism, and I think it's a wonderful thing. Some others feel very differently, especially when it deals with education and profit around education. But those are issues which AmeriGas will have to deal with. It's a great model in cost plus because it leaves all of the risk for market fluctuations with the district and preserves AmeriGas's profit margin, which is explanatory of being able to 100% know that they can cover the costs of those capital expenditures of $269,000 plus, probably a little over 300 with the canopy, with the add-on plus floor mats and undercarriage coating, things like that. And the tax rebate, my concern is that one of the things that wasn't mentioned in forward pricing is geopolitical fluctuations. Given the current administration, I'm not so certain how long tax rebates for green energy will be in play. That would be a concern that I had on a look forward on this. So perhaps if we could address in the proposal how the infrastructure costs make sense if those tax rebates were to go away. Is that something we can discuss today? Or I don't expect you to be able to jump through hoops and answer all those number questions now, but certainly before it comes before the board, I would think that would be something that would have to be addressed.
Okay. And both of those are very valid. To answer your question very simply is we have a contract or would have a contract with Indian County River Schools for a 3 or 5 year period of time. So yes, during that time frame, it would be AmeriGas. At that point, then, you're more than free to put that out to bid and do another RFP process for other vendors. There's Feral Gas, there's Suburban, and there's a lot of small, what we call mom and pops, the guys that have maybe one tank, one truck. So there are other propane vendors in the area, absolutely. So.
But those costs there would be realized during that contract period, I would assume.
Yes.
Any reasonable business model would include that.
Just to follow up for clarification, so after the 3 to 5 years that we purchased, basically, because our prices are gonna be higher because we're paying off for the equipment, we own that equipment, or you own that equipment?
That would be up to the contractual agreement because that could be possible. Now, we've talked about doing what we call piggybacking because there are existing contracts by other school districts that are similar to Indian River County School District. So if you piggyback, then we have to go with the language that is with that particular school. In this instance, Pinellas is the one that we're looking at possibly piggybacking. If that's the case, then whatever's in that language at the end of that 5 year contract, then you could, again, put that back out and put in whatever you would like for that to be. I mean, if you were a new customer, say, I could fix price. Mm-hmm. So he's brought up a great point, depending on all kinds of variables. AmeriGas will fix price for 2 or 3 years. Now, there's risk in that because propane could go up and our fixed price is $1 whatever, we're good. But if propane goes down, that's the risk, because now you're still going to be at that fixed price. I just had a school district in Pennsylvania do a 2 year fixed price. They were willing to take that chance. So there are other options that are viable options. It depends on the school district and how you want to proceed. But as we speak now, we're looking at piggybacking a current contract, which we can get you a copy of that, obviously.
That may or may not have been negotiated by people who understand business. Just a thought. School boards vary greatly in quality.
Right.
Mrs.
Well,
Ork?
I would like to see the contract. I would like to read it. Just a question. Is there any special training that the bus drivers have to go through to, or do we have to now hire a new person to just sit there and fuel the buses all day?
Okay, another good question. AmeriGas is all about safety. That's our highest priority. So in order for me to put any type of equipment or any exposure by any employee at Indian River County School District, we'll go through some type of training. It's what we call Propane 101. Propane is a fuel that is not utilized as much as we think it should be. The flammability of propane is a lot less than gasoline or diesel, so it's harder to ignite. The tanks that are on the school buses are steel versus your plastic gasoline or diesel tanks. So when we come in and set infrastructure, all of Jennifer's employees, whether it's the bus driver, Richard's group, anybody that's going to be around that will have a training, both hands-on training at the site as well as a PowerPoint presentation and a whole scenario where we go through. It's by PERC. If you want to research, it's Propane Education Research Council. So they give us guidelines that need for education purposes.
Follow-up?
Yes. So I don't think unless I missed it, it's gonna cost us $261,000 or $69,000. That equipment, we're gonna pay it off technically with the cost of our per gallon in 3 to 5 years. What type of savings are we gonna see after the 3 to 5 years? Are we gonna see savings?
Yes.
And take away the tax credit, because
Yes.
the
I don't
way,
count-
I
I
agree
never
with him.
count the- I never
The way
count
that the climate is, that's more than likely gonna go away.
Okay. I never count that, so that's a great point. Yes, that price, once that equipment is paid off and we're at the end of that contract, then of course we would renegotiate the contract moving forward.
And our savings over the years too, we look at 5 years down the road, because we're propane and we're getting out of the diesels. We're not gonna have that big cost of buying diesel parts like we are today. So we look at 5 years, 6 years down the road of even saving more money just on maintenance.
So one of my concerns is the fact that, okay, we purchased the equipment, we're in a contract, and there's that cable company that was mentioned earlier. As soon as your contract ends, then your prices triple, you know.
Play, sorry.
That's not something that we're going to be seeing, is that? Do you have a historic pattern of that, or?
I can get that for
Okay.
you as far as other schools, but, I mean, at that point, why would we do that? I'm relying on Jennifer and Indian River County School Districts to tell other school districts of why you went to propane, why you made this business decision. The last thing I want you to do is answer the phone from Polk County or Volusia County, and they go, hey, why'd you go to propane? Well, it was a great price, but in 3 years, they raised our price $3. That's, as he talked about, the business model. That's not a good business model. We're gonna try to do, one, what's the most, what's best for both parties involved. And so, no, that price, because the equipment then is paid off. Does that make sense?
It's a good answer.
I
Mr.
mean,
Chair.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Dr. Reno. Yes,
So I
sir.
don't know if we actually covered the difference in the
No, not
cost
yet. That's what
to
I'm looking at.
refuel the bus bobtail versus refueling the bus with a tank on site.
Okay. So, with the propane price being fluctuated, which it's shown here, this was based on a piggyback contract that you did with Route Your neighboring county, Broward County Schools, and that was 50 cents. That was no equipment, no nothing. Okay?
I don't know if it was Brevard or Broward.
Or, sorry.
Was it Brevard?
Yeah, no, it was Broward.
Broward.
Broward
Okay,
County,
further
yeah,
south.
it's Broward. So they came back and said, we want equipment. So I've just completed 3 locations, tanks, dispensers, and we negotiated a whole new contract. In between that, the contract with Indian River County School District obviously was up. So you're currently using Seminole County mobile fueling contract until we decide what the school board wants to do with this. So what you're gonna look at then is if you piggyback off of Pinellas County Schools contract, they're at 78 cents. So if, in this example, if it's 95, we would add 78 to 95, and that would be the cost of propane. If it goes down to 80 cents, then you add 80 cents and the 78 cents. So again, that price, the markup is fixed. Does that answer your question?
Mhm.
Okay. So currently, I think you're at 76 cents, I think, is a Seminole County contract, and that's no equipment. With equipment, it would be 78.5.
So slightly more than we're paying now.
Yes, but you'd have the equipment.
Well, and I also noticed this rebate is about 36% roughly of the equation here. And it concerns me greatly that 36% is at risk here with counting on a tax rebate. And in general, I'm sure that those districts have fantastic contracting departments and things like that, but as far as negotiating deals, Mr. Searcy often points to that about, are we really getting the best deal with these piggybacks? I look at some of these deals and they don't look like great deals,
Mr. Pop,
but I make very good deals. Mrs. Justice, you're recognized.
thank you very much. You've given us a lot of information today, and I appreciate that. I've learned a lot of new things, and I'd like to step back and be able to do some research and look at this and ask some more questions. One thing that I certainly recognize is AmeriGas is realizing a real cost savings in this type of a venture. And so while I respect enterprise and all of those things, that does, that is something that I think as a school district and in looking at this, it's something that I really want to look at is what's best for our bottom line right now. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And my position right now is I'd like to step back and be able to kind of ask some more questions and do some more research.
Makes sense. Mrs. Ork, would you like to comment?
Gary here and Richard, is there anything that, because when I went out, they were very passionate about this, so I didn't know if you wanted to have the opportunity to speak about this?
Well, thank you. If we was to get the tanks, it would make us a lot better in our operation, because right now, when the bobtail comes in there, we have to be there when the bobtail is there. If we're not there, then the bus doesn't get filled up and it doesn't do its route. And with all these field trips and middays and after school, we need it, and it would free us up a lot. We could pull in there and get fuel anytime. Right now, if I have a bus going to Daytona tomorrow morning, I can't use that bus this afternoon. I have to wait until AmeriGas gets there at 9:30, in which they are every day. I have to wait until they get there at 9:30 to fill that bus up to send it to Daytona. Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Justice.
Have you found that AmeriGas has been willing to work with you?
Oh,
and be
yes. We've had buses go to Tampa, and they were over there for 3 days, and we couldn't figure out how to get them back. I called Dave. He got me in touch with an office over in Tampa. They went to where the school function was and filled that bus up so we could get back to Bureau. And they also did that in Daytona. They've done it for us like 3 times. So all I have to do is call Dave. He finds a dealer over there, and they come and they fill them up.
And as far as scheduling to come and do the bobtailing here,
Right.
have they been considerate of your usage of the buses?
Yes.
Have they offered flexibility?
Yes. They're a great company to work with. I don't know what we've done without them. They're there every day, rains, the sun, it's hot out there. They're there every day, filling up 53 buses. And we just put 10 new ones up in North County. And they were willing to send a truck up there to fill up those 10. So, they take when they get done with us, they go on their regular route, McDonald's and wherever they go. So, yeah, we depend on AmeriGas. Their 2 drivers are like part of our garage down there now. They've been doing it for 4 years, So, yeah, we're happy with AmeriGas.
Basically, the way I see it, our efficiency level is falling off. It's hurting the transportation department efficiently by not having a dispensing system. We are doing everything correct in saving the taxpayers' dollars by switching to propane. We're saving the 10-year life cycle with a 200,000-mile window is what we're looking at. And currently, we're falling into that. The diesels cost a lot more money than the propanes to maintain. The life cycle costs are a whole lot less. The numbers David put up there are actual. We've seen that. We do have buses, propane buses that are 6 years old. The cost of those vehicles to maintain is way less than the diesel. We don't want to go back that direction, but we have to have some infrastructure to help support this situation, because we're not being efficient by not having a dispensing system. To wait on the truck at 9:30, it's not efficient. We need to be able to say the driver needs fuel at 5 o'clock in the afternoon because she's leaving out at 5 o'clock in the morning, or we have, athletics going on, or any of those things in after school. We have no way to work around that. If we don't put some kind of dispensing system in, we're just going to become less and less efficient. And every year that it goes past, we add more buses, we become less efficient. So at some point in time, we have to put in a dispensing system. The guys from AmeriGas are there 3 hours probably every single day fueling up buses, 3 hours. That's a lot of time. And if you have an ESE bus or something that needs to go out midday, well, now they have to jump in line. The guy has to take his hose off, move to fuel that bus, and then go back working down the line to refuel. When if we had a dispensing system, the driver can pull over, they need fuel. If they need fuel every day, they get fuel every day. If they need fuel every other day, they get fuel every other day. The AmeriGas driver doesn't know if that bus actually needs 40 gallons or if that bus needs 80 gallons. He has to hit every single bus to make sure it's topped off. And the driver, if they could dispense themselves, would help alleviate all those issues.
So if there are 2 pumps, would that solve all the queuing issues?
I don't think so. I don't know if, currently at 63, we're talking 4 nozzles. I think we're going to be fairly tight at 4. We will have to keep growing dispensers and nozzles down the road. If we go to 100% propane, which I expect us to do, we will need more dispensers. It will have to grow. And we've talked about with the layout of how the tanks and the dispensers, can we make sure we can add on? We don't want to lock ourselves into a situation where, we've built this, now we can't utilize expansion. So,
And we also look too at North County. We got 40-something buses up there. And we just put 10 2019s up there. The ones we just got went up there. So, we're looking at 34 more. So, in the years to come, we're going to have to look at putting a tank up there too. Maybe not as big as a tank, because we have 30, 40 buses up there, but, in 2 or 3 years, we're going to have to look at that too. But, this, when we started this program, it was to save money on fuel, but it was also a green thing. I don't know how many of y'all been over to a school, and you see 20, 25 diesels crank up, and you see all that smoke. And what are those kids doing? They're walking right through it into your clean schools. Well, we want to clean up the outside the school too. And we look at this as being a way to clean up outside, so these kids won't be inhaling this stuff.
Mrs. Justice.
Thank you. David, out of the 830 districts, private schools, and bus contractors, what's the percentage that have a fueling station that they're using right now?
I can't give you the exact
The ones that I have been associated with, and that's not those, that's nationwide. 20% will start out like an Indian River County School District did. We'll go in and fuel the buses with a bobtail. The current contracts that I have now, Indian River County School District is the only one that does not have infrastructure in. So you did the right thing. You started 5 years ago, you got into it, you started ordering the buses, we were mobile fueling. Other school districts have done the same, but they have since put in infrastructure. Pinellas started out that way, Seminole County started that way, Hillsborough County, Broward County schools. They had 190 buses that we were literally went and bought 2 bobtails, hired 2 new drivers just to service that account. So now they've gone, and now they've got 3 locations that they put infrastructure in. So it's a difficult question, but most all districts, with the exception of the 2 that I did in Georgia, Fulton County and Paulding County, had the infrastructure put in, and then they got their buses. So.
And your question about training the drivers, it's a bus. You know, everything's the same, except it's got a propane in it. Everything else is just the same. And
But-
I've seen the new dispensers, and I can operate it. You know.
The piece of the question that I thought was most interesting was, would we have like what I would call the Oregon model, right? Where you can't pump your own gas. So we'd have to have a fuel attendant now that we have to hire and have on hand
This-
24/7.
This nozzle just snaps on,
16.
and you go over and turn the pump on, and it tightens up, and it fills the bus up, and then it clicks off, and you, just like your gas, you pull the handle, take it off, and you hang it up, and that's all there is to it.
That'd be
It's-
covered in
it's not-
propane
and you
101,
don't-
right?
You don't
Yes.
have the,
Okay.
you don't have the diesel smell and stuff on your hands neither, like these ladies do when they're down there filling up with diesel or gas.
Thank you. Guess it comes down to seeing the terms and conditions presented, right?
Right, I think the next thing to do would be to look at some numbers, maybe share that with the board.
Sounds good. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that's the last
you.
of our topics to cover today.
Great. Anything further? No further business before us. We are adjourned.